And I like don't want to jinx it out loud, but it's a miracle. This only took me, I mean, like half an hour today to get this going. So fingers crossed, tech gods smile upon me. Okay, let's take a look at what we're talking about today, y'all. We are going to be talking about curiosity and attuned listening. This is live number 4, and I will send the recording out. Just stay with me till the end. I've got some things I want to catch you up on. In the meantime, I already know Mandy and Isidro are there, but go ahead and just type it in the comments. Just chat with me and let me know who you are, where you're from. Is this your first one? Okay, there's a lag, so I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so for those of you that have been on, you've seen this graphic before, but basically this is the human-to-human sales acumen model in a visual. And what we've done already is we've already talked about heart set, and which is basically benevolent intent and that genuine desire to help your buyer win based on their definition of winning. And then we've already done a couple of, actually we've done all of the mindset, the 3 C's, which were clarity, conviction, and curiosity. We did last week, we did recognizing buyers. So we are well into the skill set at this point, right? We've done heart set and mindset, and those are the prerequisites. Now we're up in the skill set. This week, we are going to talk about curiosity and attuned listening. We still have a couple weeks left. We've got critical thinking, which is one of the most important. And then we've got advocacy. Okay, so let's go right into it. So curiosity. So as you just saw, curiosity, it lives in 2 places. It lives in mindset because it is almost like it's who you are, right? It's part of the way that you think and how you show up. It's like how you show up and how you walk in. That's the curiosity is already in your mindset. It's like it's who you are, right? And then the skill set, which is executing on that mindset. It's doing the thing, which is being curious live in the moment. And so that's why it has to fall under skill set, because curiosity just as a mindset is a way of thinking. It's not the practical application. So I want to make sure that I included it here. And then today we are going to talk about how it manifests itself as a skill. And let's see, there we go. Okay, now here's where I get stuck sometimes with sales reps. You can't have a script for curiosity, right? There isn't a checklist for curiosity. And when I tell you that I've seen those out there, I'm not lying. You can use a list of discovery questions. You can use a checklist to help you figure out what you're going to say. So not using those words, but making it your own. Like, how would I say that? Because if it's not how you say it, it's going to sound like an interrogation, and it's going to sound like you're reading, which doesn't work well for anybody. The other thing that's important is this is my subtle reminder that you should never read these. Like, nobody buys anything from the hot seat. When you are going down a list, you're just pissing off that buyer. That's exactly what's happening. And it doesn't feel genuine. Got a lot of builds in here. Okay. So back to mindset and heart set. When we're talking about genuine curiosity, that is being fueled by benevolent intention. In other words, if I genuinely want to help my buyers succeed, then when I go in to meet with them, I'm going to have a lot of questions. They're not on the script. They're questions that I recognize I need to ask so that they will share information that lets me help them. And that is the genuine, natural way to have curiosity and have it function within the sales process and sales conversations in a way that's effective and will not alienate your buyer. You standardize scripts, just please stop. This, honestly, I cannot tell you how much this hurts my feelings. The minute you turn it into a script, the minute it feels like you've got a script, you're no longer the genuine salesperson, trusted advocate you need to be. At the end of the day, machines, even the really good ones, they can't show that benevolent intention. Without benevolent intention, you're not going to have pure, genuine curiosity, not the kind that's going to move a deal forward, right? Machines can read scripts. The minute you start doing that kind of thing, that's what you're going to be going toward, right? Oops, hold on. Make sure. Here we go. Okay. So now let's talk a little. I want to talk a little, explain this a little bit. Oops, there we go. So as humans, we are born with genuine curiosity, right? If you've ever hung out with a little kid, you know very, very well how curious they can be. That's how we are, that's how we're made as human beings. Well, of course, life happens, right? And there's some things that happen that kick that curiosity out of us, whether that's somebody didn't appreciate it, whether that's you got an answer that you didn't want, regardless, things happen, right? In sales, we are particularly horrible about kicking curiosity out of sales reps. I'm going to probably wait till later for this soapbox, but what I'm trying to say here is when you hand a sales professional, when we walk in with MedPick, Medic, Bant, Spin, blah, blah, any of them, now we are already having to give up however much time and part of the conversation that would have been genuine about the human and my curiosity. It is that space has been taken up by the things that I have to do, the steps that I have to go through. And these methodologies, they're all meant to standardize, right? And templatize curiosity, which we already know the minute that happens, it is no longer going to work. Right. So these are things that are just going to knock the curiosity out of even the best human who has the best like intention, right? So targets, pipeline inspections, these are things that as sales professionals, we live with every single day. When you are living with that kind of pressure, that kind of day-to-day responsibility and accountability, that benevolent intent, that gets lost in all the noise, right? So that desire to go help your customer succeed, to help that buyer win and make the best decision, if I'm so busy, like figuring out how to update the CRM, that's driving me crazy. If I have to be in pipeline meetings where I'm getting inspected, all of those things drown out that genuine curiosity. And so what this means for us as sales professionals in our world today is we got to be very vigilant about what we let in and make sure that we're not letting things erase that curiosity, right? Because if you erase that benevolent intent, and if you trade that genuine curiosity for templates and toll gates and rainbow colored sales sheets, what happens? Like, what are we left with? Think about it. If you are a salesperson and that curiosity has been tamped down and you've got scripts, you've got your methodology, you've got this color sheet to fill out, stakeholder map, you name it. Well, the thing is, that's what you're left with. Because if a machine can do it, a machine will be doing it sooner rather than later. I'm actually just going to leave this here. All right. The other thing that's important, like, and I'm almost like kind of trying to remind y'all about curiosity, but if you think back to when you were in college or you knew somebody who was in college, in real life, curiosity is pretty important. And in real life, we don't try to templatize it. We don't try to, actually, we often don't try to templatize it. We don't try to make it a checklist. We go and ask the questions. Now, if you think about college, I recently, like last year, 2 years ago, I was on college visits with my kids. And you'd have this student who was in that tour, and they were asking questions like literally they had their notebook open as we're walking through this quad, and they're asking things like, well, what's the acceptance rate? And how many dorms are there? And do you have private dorms? All things that could be looked at online in a brochure on US News, at a minimum on one of the generative AIs, all information that they could have gotten elsewhere. And they sounded like they were a machine. If I'm that school, I'm not trying to admit that student. Then you had this one other student who I loved, and my kids did okay, but the other student was asking very genuine questions like, how do new students experience the quad day, or how do new students make new friends? What are some things that you guys do to help foster connection, right? How much time do I need to allocate to move-in day? All things that you really can't find online. So in our equivalent would be some things like culture, what does everybody here do on holidays? All the things that are genuine curiosity, because guess what? That student, not a buyer, they want to make their own self successful. So that burden of making themselves successful includes getting to the point where they're getting answers that are going to help them make the best decision of which school they're going to go to. Right. So that's my first example. I'm going to just look at the chat real quick just to make sure. Okay, good. We got nothing right now. So that's story one. Now, story two is speed dating. So if you think about how speed dating's done, it's basically you get 6 minutes with whoever they put you with. It's like round robin. And in that 6 minutes, you need to ask whatever questions you need to ask to see if there's a connection. Well, people who are constantly trying to be effective will go in there with their little list of 5 or 6 questions. And the thing is, when you know you've got 6 minutes and you're looking at this list, you're going to ask one question after the other. You're not going to stop and follow up on a question. You're not going to interject because you know you've only got 6 minutes, and these are like your deal breaker questions. You got to get them answered. So what does that do? Well, I mean, clearly it pisses off the person that you're paired up with in that moment because they know that you're actually just checking off a list and you're seeing if they're qualified. You are qualifying that person as a potential partner. It's bananas. And this I know happens in real life. I had a friend tell me a really detailed story about it, but most people wouldn't do this because we understand that genuine curiosity in that moment is an asset. Okay. But there are people who are going to do it, but the outcome is not good. The outcome kills the actual connection. Without the connection, trust ain't happening. And you will not pass go. You will not have a date with this person. Okay. So any questions, just chime into the chat. I'm just looking over here. Okay. So if you want to fight being a machine, right? If you want to make sure that you don't sound like a robot in terms of curiosity, you got to ask wide open, sincere. I keep using words like genuine and sincere. I try not to use authentic. It's so played out. It's true, but anyway, sincere questions that are human to human, questions about connection, about that person, that human being. All right. Um, well, actually, I'm going to give you an example of that first. Let me before I do that. I'm talking about questions like, how is this going to impact your team? Think about it. If you're talking to a leader, any leader, even a bad one, worth their salt, is going to at least try to act like they care about their team, right? Most of them are pretty good, right? And they do. But by asking that human to human question, you're making it about that person, that leader, and how they feel about their team. The insight that you're going to get from that is going to be far more valuable than something like, how are you measured? Or what does success look like? By the way, those questions are asked by every other vendor. The vendor before you and the vendor after you have probably asked that question or a very close form of it. If you want to be memorable, which you have to be if you're going to differentiate anymore, you've got to ask genuine questions delivered with benevolent intent that are specific to that human, right? Obviously, you have to ask your basic questions. You've got to get information if you're going to, sell something to someone. I'm not saying you delete that, but wherever you have an opportunity, ask these wide open questions. We'll talk a lot more about that. If you join the boot camp, there's like a whole module on this. Okay, so now if you think about attuned listening and curiosity, we talked about curiosity a little bit. These two are like buy one, get one free, that you can't have one without the other. Because what happens is if you're doing curiosity, but you're not listening, you are pissing off that buyer because they can tell that you're not listening. And then they feel like, why did I even bother saying any of that? And then their questions and their answers get more clipped and short, and that makes you more nervous, and it just goes bad fast, right? And attuned listening is part of how you make that buyer recognize that they matter to you. And we'll talk about this in the next session or future session, but psychological safety is vital. And it is an ingredient to helping influence your buyer. If you're not working on psychological safety, which attuned listening is a huge component of it, you're never going to get to that point where you can actually influence that buyer. Okay. I already said this. I can't get ahead of myself. I already said all this. All right. So the thing I think that's important to remember is that we talk about curiosity and attuned listening today. This is like the first time-ish in this model that this comes up. But attuned listening and curiosity, these are your BFFs for life, right? Like you don't give them up. You carry that into every conversation, every stage, because trust, for example, is something that builds. It's cumulative. You don't just like think, hey, in my discovery section, my discovery conversation, I'm going to do a really good job at being curiosity and being curious and having attuned listening. And then I'm going to forget about it and go back to being a checklist person. That fails. And then that actually confuses the buyer because, like, where's the person that was in that discovery call? That's who I took the second call with. So you want to just make sure that you are not giving that up. Never give it up in the sales cycle. Okay. All right. So as a sales professional, when you're sitting in that moment, here's what are some of the things, like, just to be fair, this is some of the stuff that we are thinking of in a moment if we are not managing our own mindset, right? So inevitably, when someone's speaking, you are thinking to yourself, okay, what am I going to say? How am I going to move this forward? What do I need to do? I don't want to look like a fool in front of my buyer, right? You've got pressure of, I better get this closed by the end of the quarter. And then, wait, oh my God, I only have 10 minutes left. What do I have left to do in 10 minutes? I've got my timing, I've got my need, but I still need authority and budget. Shit, let me make sure I do those. This is legitimately, and I'm not gonna make you raise your hands, but there's a lot of this noise going on in your head when you're supposed to be listening. And when you think about the fact that you're doing it because you care, you don't want to look like a fool in front of your buyer. The problem is it'll look a lot worse on you if you are not listening than if you say something stupid. They'll forgive you every time for saying something that's not accurate. What they won't forgive you for is blatantly not listening or asking a question that doesn't have anything to do with what they just said, which proves you weren't listening. And so you got to get out of your own head. And that is, by the way, the hardest thing to do, because as sales professionals, we are go-getters. Like, we have an objective, we have a goal, we're trying to close this deal. And so we have to almost stop ourselves and say, look, I have to stop doing the thing that somehow is my intuition to do in this moment. I have to slow down to speed up, because I will not get what I need, and I will not build the trust, which is what I need to get influence with this buyer. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. No questions, y'all are quiet. All right, looks like we don't have that many people on today. All right, so now active listening. So this is, I'm going to try to keep it this side of a rant. Many, many years ago, someone invented, and I wish I could remember Harwood something. Anyway, it was like a marriage therapist. They came up with this dialogue where you would just listen to your partner and say something like, here's what I think I heard, right? And somehow training industry got a hold of that, right? Sales training in particular, and a lot of other active listening trainings. And so people get trained on, here's how you show active listening. You have to repeat what they said and say, like, did I get that right? Okay, cool. That worked maybe the first 2-3 years that happened. After that, once like 10 million people were trained on that, customers know that have been trained. You are coming in here using a technique on them. You are using a play on them. How does that feel? Like, when you're out there buying something, you can tell when they are rattling off something that they were told to say in that sales process, right? By whoever trained them. And it feels gross. It feels gross. And so that's where we get some of our slimy, sneaky, shady attribution. That's why that negative connotation continues, because we keep doing things like this. Active listening is not going to work anymore. And if anything, the genuine active listening, which is like the real thing, which isn't about the statement that you're going to make or the phrase, it's about understanding that I do want them to know and make sure that I said the thing that, or make sure I understand what they said in a way that is correct. That's okay. I'm not saying, don't ask about it, but don't use the same damn phrase all the time. Just say something like, okay, this is what I took down. I think I'm right about this. I'm not sure about this. Does that track? That is very similar to, like, did I get that right? But it's a human way to say it. Now, mind you, if I train 10 million people, it no longer will be. But for the moment, because it's mine, it's something I came up with in the moment, it's real, it's legitimate, it'll work. Okay. We already talked about this, but if you're in your own head, there ain't no attuned listening. You just can't do it. It is a skill set that requires you to be all tuned in to what is happening in that room and what's happening around you. So you've got to turn that noise off. Not easy, but you can do it. The difference is between attuned and active listening. If I had to boil it down, and this is tricky, but I would say that attuned listening, you're not listening for just words. You're listening for all the forces that are at play in that room that can give you any indication of what that means to the sales process. So it's much more than words. Active listening is like listening to the words and showing that you're listening physically. I'm listening. Attuned listening is taking in everything that you need to be getting from what they're saying, but keeping an eye on everything that's going around, keeping an eye on things like their tone, the inflection, body language, eye contact, all these things. And in the boot camp, we go into more detail into each of these, but that's generally the kind of thing that you're listening for. And every seller can hear the words, right? That doesn't take that much skill. As long as you're paying attention, you're going to hear the words that came out of their mouth. But those words themselves are not going to create a whole lot of meaning. If you recognize the context, which is all these things we just talked about, like the tone, inflection, etc., that is the context around the words that really makes the words matter. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. And I like to say this, and look, elite sellers, and this is something way before I started talking about it. Elite sellers are out here feeling the words. They can sense. And it's before anyone says that you're born with that, you can't train that. That's a lie. You can. It's training your brain to actually do that. But they have a good inventory of what's happening around them. They're keeping an eye on that buyer in that corner and that buyer in that corner while still maintaining a conversation with this buyer. Very important, right? It's the words that they're not saying that are where the magic happens. Because think about it, if you've got questions that you're asking that are even somewhat similar to what other vendors ask, these buyers, like, they're not dummies. They have a canned response for you. They're not trying to re-answer the same thing 8,000 different ways. They know what they have to say when you ask them one of those generic questions. Even some of the good questions, they have like a shtick that they're going to do. Well, that's not, you can't differentiate with that, because if I'm a buyer and I'm giving a canned answer to vendor one, vendor two, vendor three, they all have learned the same thing. And so they can't go back and create value that's different based on what was said. Hope that makes sense. This one's a little bit tricky to understand, but at the end of the day, if I was doing attuned listening, I will hear the words that they said, which is what all the other vendors heard. But I will also recognize that they kept on mentioning this one person 3 times. In the conversation, this person's name came up 3 times, and it's one of their peers. And you know what? I better make a note to dig into who that person is and like why they keep on bringing it up, because people don't bring up someone 3 times unless there's something there. And so that is something that you're not gonna see, and you're not gonna understand and recognize if, one, you're not totally tuned in, and two, you aren't trained to listen to more than just the words, right? You have to understand the whole picture. So I know this is a horse I like to beat to death, because it could not be more important. If I had to say active listening, I can tell you the good kind, that when it started, right? Like the idea of being able to physically show that was a good thing. Active listening in its pure form was a good thing, right? We killed it with scripts, but it was a good thing. The thing is, even if it's done right today, it is not enough. They expect it. Buyers expect you for active listening. And if you think back to like the first one of these sessions we had, I talked a lot about how human buyers are turning more and more to sales professionals to help them clarify and contextualize what's going around them in the world. And so more and more, you're going to need to be able to tune your listening so that you can help them based on their perspective and what's going on behind just the words that they give you. And I'll tell you what, when you do this and when they recognize that you're doing this, like, honestly, I say magic because I mean magic. When they catch that you're catching those things, you elevate yourself immediately in the eyes of that buyer, because they didn't have to get vulnerable to tell you a thing. You were able to just ask the question and make it natural for it to come out for them. Psychological safety, super duper important. Okay, still, we don't have, I don't think, maybe better check and see we don't have any chat. Okay, we're good. Now, I can't remember. So hopefully I haven't said this before, but this is a story that just kills me. This is like my key example of this. So I'm an embedded coach, right? So I often go on sales calls with my customers, which are the sales professional, right? And their end customer. So my sales partner that I'm working with, that I'm going to coach, and then their end customers. This in particular was a technology company that I was with the salesperson, tech salesperson. I think they were selling like, I want to say managed services, if I remember right. We went in and we're talking to a a CIO, right? Chief Information Officer, and a director of IT. You can kind of maybe guess which one's which in this image, right? My salesperson, like, I mean, I was proud of him because he got us to the C level, right? And he was super excited. And so he gets in there and he starts asking some good questions, and he's talking to the CIO, and I'm watching, and the CIO keeps on glancing over at Joe, who's the IT director. He does it maybe 5 or 6 times. My seller's still asking the questions. The CIO at one point says something like, "Hey, Joe, what do you think about that? I want to make sure that I get your take." Literally, like those kinds of words is what he said. Joe looks up and is like giving some sort of a very clipped, short answer. He's not about to give anything to this person who's been ignoring him for the past 15 minutes. And he's got his arms crossed, and he's just like not a happy person right now. But did my sales professional notice that? No, they did not. Not only did they not notice that, but they did not notice me over here in the corner with my eyebrow at the ceiling, trying to do eye contact and make them look at Joe and talk to Joe, right? And that is the difference between like active listening and attuned listening. I don't doubt that he was hearing the words that CIO was saying. In fact, I think he was very oriented to those words, but those words are not enough. And now the byproduct of it is he's pissed off the director of IT, which clearly there's a pretty good sense of influence that IT has, that director of IT has with the CIO. Otherwise, CIO wouldn't keep on asking him what his thoughts were. So it's like thinking about that people-y stuff that's going on. That interaction between the CIO and that director, there weren't words that were giving me insight into that. It was me watching and seeing what is going on. Again, don't try to tell me that this is something that you're born with. You're not. You can learn it. You just have to train yourself and you have to reinforce it when you do. Okay, so we get out of this and we're on the drive home. I did have short hair back then. So we're driving home and driving back to the office rather. And, I'm sure he was like, shit, I'm screwed. Anita's going to kill me in this car drive home. But I calmed down before I spoke. And I mustered up enough to say, hey, how come you didn't include the director more in that conversation? Like, I'm trying to not be mean and angry. And he had a pretty decent answer. He's like, well, you told us, and we've learned that it's really important to communicate with the economic buyer. If he's the decision maker, then I need to make sure that I'm getting all the information I need out of him, right? So like the IT director is not the signing authority. And in my head, I wanted to cry because he was 100% right. Okay. And then I would ask some other questions like, why did you go back to those slides when you were doing well with that conversation? And he was like, well, he was he was giving me answers, but I wanted to make sure that I had the answers right. And that slide deck, it does a really good job of showing the answer. And I was like, but you know that answer cold. I know this because we talked about this on the drive there. He's like, yeah, but it's the CIO. I don't want to mess it up. So I just want to make sure. In my head, I'm like, okay, this is what's going on here. As an industry, sales leaders, CEOs, CIOs, whatever, we have done a just sad disservice to sales professionals. We're out here giving them templates and guidance and telling them what to do, telling them how to do it. And then we have the nerve to wonder why they aren't responding the way that they need to in that moment. What have we done to help them with that? And that's a big reason why this whole thing that I woke up one day and decided I was going to go all in on, it's because of this. It's easy for a sales leader to tell me they're not self-aware, or they don't know how to read the room, or they just never know what to do. Something will come up and they don't know how to handle it. Cool. Well, did you teach them that? Did you ever teach that sales professional how to think? Because in a moment where a deal will ultimately be won or lost, that thought process is going to make sure that that salesperson does the right thing. And this is like one of my hills I'll die on. I have full faith that if I teach a sales professional how to think, and by the way, I have a career built on this, if I teach them how to think and I show them how to look at something, I don't have to be in the room. They don't have to have a script. If something comes up that doesn't have a script, they're going to do the right thing. Like, I'm confident because the thought process that they have, because I drilled it into them, that is intact and that will guide whatever it is they do. So in that moment where the deal is won or lost, I trust that they've got the winning thought process, and that is what's going to determine how they behave in that moment. So yeah, I'm a little passionate about this. Moral of the story is, look, even if you're a sales professional on here, even if you are inundated with like blue sheet, green sheet, you've got checklist, you've got, I better track this for the toll gate and all these things. Okay, I get it. It's your job. You're not going to not get that information. But trust yourself to have a genuine conversation. And at the end, you can scrape up and get all those things later. But do not make your call all about getting the things that you have to check the list. You will be forgiven if you advance that deal and that buyer is like trusting you. You'll be forgiven for not getting that couple of details that you need. And it's okay. You can ask about budget the next meeting. You shouldn't be asking about it right now anyway. Okay, so you have to give yourself permission to be genuine and to be curious and to be real, even though there's things that have taught you not to be. Moral of that story. Okay, so now let's see, we're at, okay, 11:30. I don't want to have to keep you guys on here too long. I think I've lost some people, but let's do some quick takeaways, right? Curiosity isn't a script. It's not a checklist. This horse is dead in a pulp. You have to give yourself permission to go against what you've been told, or maybe even like just push that off a little bit so that you don't become a robot. Because the minute you do, I can promise you it won't be long before a robot is sent in there instead of you. Okay. You have to clear out what is in your head. If you're going to do attuned listening, your brain just cannot be worried about itself at the same time as it's supposed to have a benevolent intention to learn from the buyer. It just doesn't work. This is elite. What I'm talking about here, attuned listening, it is elite, and it's something elite sellers have done for a very long time, and they make it look natural. Many of them have been trained, but it is table stakes now. It's not going to be elite anymore because it is the thing that is differentiating people and salespeople from being a robot and sounding robotic. It's that humanity. If you take the humanity and the human piece out, you might as well be a bot. Like I've been saying since 2019. I digress. Okay. Can't have one without the other. This is a buy one, get one free. These two are partners for life. You do not give them up. They are with you throughout the entire sales. Actually, they're with you forever and ever and ever after you get off this session. I want you to always remember that when you are in a conversation, and by the way, in life, this shit really helps too, but be curious, be genuine, do the attuned listening. I promise you, you'll very quickly see the difference in how that buyer or how your teenage kid responds when you play this game instead of trying to be old school active listening. Did I get that right? That just goes over poorly. Okay. So let's real quick in the chat. There's not many of us, but if you are watching the recording, just think to yourself, write it down what you're going to do based on what we've talked about today. There's several little things that you can do. And the thing is, in the boot camp, we're going to talk a lot more about these. If you do want the slides from this session, because it takes like maybe a day or two for us to post them. If you want them right away, just DM me and I'll send them over today. And then I have to tell you more about the boot camp because I've been told that I'm not talking enough about it. But basically the boot camp is this content that I'm talking about to like 10 levels deeper with practice, with talking to peers and working on things together. And we will go into how to create those questions. Today, I was only able to give you like an example of a question, but we go into how you create a question, how you look at an old generic question and turn it into a high impact question, which is a skill that will serve you for life. You'll be able to like look at your real deals. That's a big thing for me. I need to make sure that you're looking at your deals and that you're putting that thought to it. Again, back to my whole, I got to know that you're thinking the right way. It doesn't work if I give you all these fake scenarios. Sure, I'm probably going to do a little bit of that too, but I need to see you apply it in your real deals. Okay. And then look, there's a lot of things that you can do that build towards psychological safety, that show attuned listening. We dig a lot more into those at that point. And then by the time this cohort starts, I don't know why you're going, I'm not asking them to go. By the time that cohort starts in September, you're going to be looking at, that's the last quarter of the year. So sign up for this boot camp because as you learn these things, you're going to start applying them and you will close the year out strong because the thought process that you have going into the deals after I get my hands on you for a couple of weeks is going to be powerful and it's going to have an impact on your deals immediately. And I stand by that all the way. Next up. Okay, so next week we're off because of the holiday. Critical thinking. All right, so I can't even act like I can explain how important critical thinking is. Look at World Economic Forum, look at McKinsey, Gartner, all the biggies, things that I said in 2019, but anyway, they're talking about critical thinking as a human skill that is the required in the AI era, in this era of technology even being faster than it's ever been before. So that's going to be a really good one. It's number 5. It's July 9th. Share this with your friends. The more we can spread this skill set to people, the better off our world is going to be. And if you like the session today, just pop something in the comments or send me a DM. I hate, as you know, I hate talking kind of to myself. And so it's really important that I understand that I'm hitting the mark with what you were looking for when you came into this session and that you are walking away with something. So please do me the favor of just one way or another sharing your feedback with me. I truly do take it to heart. And I think that's it. That's all I have today. Yeah, that's all I've got today. So I will stop the share for a minute and I will, as always, stick around for a few minutes here so that if you have any questions or if there's anything that you want to dig into, I'll be here to answer questions. And this is one that I feel like there could be some questions because it's a lot and it's super important. So for those of you who are going to drop, thank you. It means a lot to me that you're here.